All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Pop Health. Unfortunately, if you're seeing this recording, basically the big beautiful bill passed. Now I know has been getting thrown around in the media about being the largest cuts to billionaires, bailing out billionaires, cutting people's social service and stuff. And I wanted today really give y'all like my first impressions, and give you more context about what all that means. All right, so the bill hinges on cutting two safety net programs, Medicaid and SNAP. First, we're gonna go over Medicaid. Basically, Medicaid is a program that gives healthcare coverage to not only just low-income Americans, but also Americans with disabilities, low-income children, Americans over 65 who are unable to work. And so here's how millions of people will get cut from the bill. So pretty much 12 million adults and children will be at risk for losing health insurance, 2 million in Texas alone, due to not only just them passing this big beautiful bill, but also them not extending the ACA premium tax credits. We'll talk about that in a minute. One of the biggest things that Medicaid or Obamacare that many people like to quote it as income and eligibility will be checked closely and more often. So they'll be looking at, eligibilities every 6 months. People who are homeless and are transit may miss notices from the government, as well as people who might not speak English in certain counties. And historically, if you ever increase income eligibility checks between 2014 and 2019, they will cause many kids, especially to lose coverage, because when you talk about income and, the paperwork that goes into it, certain states and certain people are very strict on like following it to the letter of the law, or just having some more context if there's a mistake on it. That's the biggest thing with Medicaid unwinding. Whenever we started doing checks and re-eligibility here in Texas, and millions of people lost their health coverage because of the fact it's just maybe just an administrative mistake, or maybe just a mistake on their end. When filling out paperwork, like some information wasn't updated to the T, and they got cut out. But the thing that kicks me is that they will have to wait for the government to verify the information before getting coverage. The government is notoriously slow with verifying information, and there's no kind of like in between period where you can still be on coverage for some cases, while the government checks. So if your coverage time expires and you're still waiting for the government to check your information, then you're out of luck, because they might not give you that grace, especially on this president. Now, citing the biggest issue with this bill is that, there's more stringent work requirements. Most coverage losses are expected to come from the proposed work requirement, where people aged 19 through 64 will be required to work. Volunteer goes to school for 80 hours per month in order to qualify for Medicaid under the new law. They'll be exempt if they're disabled, pregnant, or parent of a child who is 14 and younger. Now, here's the thing with this case. It might seem cut and dry. Work requirements might seem like a great idea in the beginning, but when you consider that most people on Medicaid already work to some degree, that's an issue. As well as the fact that following this to the letter of the law is very hard, because at the end of the day, if you're a parent of a child who's 14 or younger, but that child is disabled or something, and you have to end up taking and being a caretaker, which I'll get into the story later on down the line in this video. That creates a problem where it's just, you got to choose between taking care of your children or going to work and making sure like having to report the requirements, or you're going to lose your healthcare coverage that might take care of your children. So you get how it gets complicated very quickly. And when the fact of the matter is only 8% of enrollees report not working or not being unable to find work, it cuts out the argument about this whole fraud and abuse that, all these people are sitting at home on Medicaid just taking money and stuff, when in actuality, it's just most people are working. Most people are unable to work due to a disability, or they can't find work because of how bad the job market is. I'm currently out of work, and now I'm not on Medicaid. I'm not affected by this at all right now. But let's say my, parents and something gonna be affected by this. Like they're older, like they are unable to work, like they need, some type of health coverage when their employee based, premiums and coverage is gone. They might not be able to get it because of this bill. So, this is an issue with work requirements. Historically, they never worked. Like Georgia and Arkansas have passed them. Let me go down here. Georgia, Arkansas, right here, which tried to enact work requirements in 2018. Roughly 18,000 people were pushed off Medicaid within 7 months. Later, a federal judge had to block the order because whenever you do work requirements, like I said, there's more administrative work, there's more paperwork. And if you mess up a little bit about that paperwork, you get kicked out of coverage, or you might be delayed whenever you try to fix those paperwork. All right, so looking at KFF, basically, when you're looking at when people getting kicked off of Medicaid due to the big beautiful bill, not only just the work requirements, but also they're rolling back the expansion that was under the Affordable Care Act, where if you're at 138% of the federal poverty level or up to that percentage, then you're able to get on Medicaid. Basically, 770K people are at risk of losing their health insurance. But another thing you need to realize is that not only is this big beautiful bill going into play, but also the Affordable Care Coverage Act are losing the enhanced tax credits. They're expiring this year now. What are enhanced tax credits? Basically, those are subsidies for people to be able to afford health insurance through premiums whenever they go through the ACA marketplace. That has helped a lot of people get on Medicaid because, premiums are expensive. If you're in the government subsidy, you're able to get low income people on Medicaid, and children especially. So pretty much when you play that as well as with the passage of this bill, those are two separate things. About 2 million people could lose Medicaid in Texas. Do you see this range? It ranges from 1.4 million to 2.5 million due to range of uncertainty. But just predict on the high end, 2 million people will lose their Medicaid coverage out of Texas. Talk about the range of services on covered Medicaid, give you one-on-one. They cover pediatric visits, nurse practitioners for family, non-emergency transportation to medical care, midwife services, early and periodic screening, diagnostics, and treatment services for individuals under the age of 21. Could be hearing services, dental, medically necessary under the Medicaid statute. As federally qualified healthcare centers, if you go to a FQHC, especially in a rural county, especially we have the rural counties in Texas, you are under threat of losing that. As well as a lot of optional state plan, services such as dental services. I know Texas offers some kind of it at the state level. Community supported living arrangements, chiropractic services, clinical services, optometry services, personal care services, prescribed medicines, eyeglasses, health homes, hospice care, nursing. There's a lot of things that, are being cut because of this big, beautiful bill. And now going back to when I was talking about, the narrative that, we're getting rid of race, fraud, and abuse. There is this mom case where she had to not only quit her job to be able to take care of her son who had a disability, but also she has to legally, give up her own guardianship of the child so that way she can get reimbursed through Medicaid. Because if you're taking care of a family member who has Medicaid, you can't get paid to be their caregiver, but there's a way you can do it by making sure you're not their legal guardian. The Medicaid program that pays for in-home care for Daniel and 8,000 other Missourians that are in Missouri with disabilities allows family members to be compensated for caregiving, but only if they're not the legal guardian of the person they take care of. So Gallagher went to the court to give her rights to make decisions for her son and transfer authority to her parents. This is after her husband died of cancer in 2019. So people going through this great lengths to be able to take care of their family members, their children, grandmas, parents and stuff. Everybody's gonna get everybody gonna get a disability. Heck, you might get a disability tomorrow due to a car accident. You might not be able to work, and now you need Medicaid. At the end of the day, everybody's gonna be affected by these cuts to the point where it's not gonna be waste, fraud, and abuse. It's actual everyday people who are just trying to get by now has to figure out another way to do it. We haven't even got to the SNAP cuts. Now, when you talk about SNAP recipients, SNAP is the program that used to be known as food stamps. Basically, it gives food assistance, or EBT cards to families to be able to provide food for their families and stuff. And pretty much when you talk about SNAP, you probably know somebody on SNAP. Let's just be real, because SNAP, it has about 42 million Americans, enrolled into the program, most of them whom are children. Like I said, do a work requirement, raising the work requirement age from 54 to 64, and forcing parents with children older than 6 to meet the work requirements. Parents with dependent children at home are currently exempt from these requirements. Now, I haven't looked through the bill that if that exemption extends from if your child has a long-lasting disability past the age of 6. But at the end of the day, it's still bad because you have still those gray areas. The bill is also forcing states to show that at least 5% of the SNAP benefit costs starting in 2028. Like I said, these are delayed cuts, meaning that, a program that was 100% federally, invested in, like 100% of the program was paid for by the federal government through congressional spending, now has to be shouldered by 5% of states, along with the fact that the administrative costs are about to go up from I think 5% to about up to 25% in some cases in some states. In Texas alone, that'll be about $1 billion each year add on to the state budget, which Texas has a good economy, but in terms of just say like COVID happens or a natural disaster happens where the state budget now has to be extended and we might be in a shortfall. State of Texas can be like, okay, since it's gonna cost an extra $1 billion a year, we don't have the money, we're not gonna extend it. And some people get cut off of SNAP. It might have higher, SNAP, restrictions. In terms of Texas, about $300 billion will be cut in SNAP overall, but pretty much, like I said, 806,000 Texans will be affected, including 683,000 Texans and families with children and kids, plus 123,000 Texans aged 55 and 64 without kids at home who are more in retirement age are going to be affected by this. And so, like I said, you might not need it now, but if you get older, have a disability, unable to work, may not have kids at home, but you can't, function by yourself, you will now have to go back to work and be able to prove it. You're not able to, you get your SNAP benefits cut and you're not gonna be able to afford groceries, and groceries are getting higher and higher. So at the end of the day, it's just a lot of people don't understand the effects of these bills until it's going to come. Unfortunately, it's not going to come, you know, right now. It's going to take a few years for the cuts kick in. And it's just one of those things where it's just like, this is going to be devastating within the next 10 years. So this is more of a ranty style video. Pretty much I'm going to go to a whole breakdown analysis about this in another longer form video, hopefully more entertaining, hopefully better edited. But all this to say is, whether you're Democrat or Republican, whether you are independent, whether you voted, you didn't vote for this, you didn't vote at all, or whether or not, Republicans are just greedy, or whether or not the 3 Democrats that passed away in Congress, are the cause of this. The fact of the matter is, this is going to affect you, whether you are on Medicaid, you're losing your coverage and stuff, or whether you're not on Medicaid and you have to suffer the effects of not only just higher healthcare costs, because a lot of these, hospitals go on Medicaid shortfalls as is. And at the end of the day, the more and more people they're not getting reimbursed on Medicaid, the more and more these costs are going to be shifted to us. And that may even cause higher premiums, or some hospitals and clinics are closing. There was a clinic in Nebraska that was set to close within the next few months in anticipation of these cuts. And the bill hasn't even passed at the time of this video I'm recording, but it probably will pass if I'm releasing this. So at the end of the day, whether or not you wanted this, didn't want this, you're going to be affected by it. Whether you are on SNAP, not on SNAP, you're going to be affected by it. Whether it is we're paying for chronic diseases more so down in the future, or crime is about to increase, because now people trying to figure out how to feed their families in some way, shape, or form. So at the end of the day, stay woke, stay voted up, stay reading up on stuff, and really understand what these politicians are saying, because this is going to be bad. And so that's it for today for Pop Health. I know it's not really just one of the feel good videos. It's not one of those like entertainment videos. I'll talk about family channels and stuff. That's coming back in my next video. But I at least want to get here and say and just give y'all this update, because I think it is very important, not only just in pop culture, politics, whatever. I think it's just for everyday Americans. This is important for y'all to know. But with that being said, stay warm, stay frosty, be safe, take care of each other, be kind, all that wonderful good stuff. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.